and welcome to Tennessee Real Estate Insider. I'm your host, Allyson Spencer, real estate investor and property manager, top producer here in East Tennessee. And today, Kara Johnson is joining me. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Kara is also a real estate investor, and I have the pleasure of managing her rental investments, which has been really exciting. Today, we're going to talk about avoiding those real estate pitfalls. And I get asked a lot from first-time investors, what should I look for? How do I get started? We talked about how to get started in our last podcast, and today we're going to talk about making the right choice so that you can succeed.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining today.
Yes.
I tell my clients, you make your money when you buy a rental and you make your money when you place the tenants.
Yeah.
Placing the tenants is a whole episode on its own, but today we're going to talk about making your money when you buy the property.
Yeah.
It's so important to go into purchasing a rental property with a mindset of, is this going to cash flow? Is this, if it doesn't cash flow, is this a resellable property?
Yeah.
What are some of the important factors when you all were looking to purchase investment properties that you considered a good strategy?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us that sometimes we did really well at and sometimes we did not is doing your due diligence to know the property. It's extremely important to, we touched on this a little bit last week or the last podcast, but knowing your numbers, how much it's going to cost to, fix up or to get this to be an established rental. One of the things that we have, really looked at in all of our rental portfolio is what has caused this to cash flow and what money did we have to put in to get here. And for us, one of the biggest things to avoid is not knowing the ins and outs and not getting a, report of an inspection is what it is of the property to be able to know what needs to be fixed.
Right. There are so many variables in determining and evaluating a property. You have location, the condition of the property, the current rental market. There are so many different variables there. And I know my husband, he is a numbers guy. He is really big on the cash on cash return. So we evaluate, okay, is this property going to take 3.5% to put down? Or now we don't move into our properties, but as a beginner, you might be looking to move in and have less money to put down.
Yeah.
Before you graduate to straight on investment loans. So the money that you're putting up front to get into the property, also the money that's going into rehab the property.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be a small project, maybe $5,000 or $10,000? Is it going to be a large project, maybe $50,000 to $100,000? And evaluating those costs before you commit to the property.
Yes.
So that you can then say, okay, the cash on cash return for this is a really good investment.
Yeah.
I know for us, we personally have certain numbers that we look for to reach that criteria. And I think that depends on everybody's bank account and reserves. I think having a budget going into the property is very important.
And with that budget, I think that that's a really important thing for people to remember. And this is something we did not do well when we first started out, is making sure that you are aware that more than likely that budget is going to go over.
Absolutely. It always does.
It always does. And so you don't want to be left blindsided and realize oh, wow, now I am not in a position or a financial position to be able to continue with this rental because I did not think that this was going to cost as much as it does.
Right. And as a property manager, I also have helped assist in rehabs with other investors, and I'm able to pull up the numbers and say, here's the contingency. You need 10 to 15% contingency because inflation happens, tragedy happens,
You open up a floor and see termites. I mean, been there.
Foundation issues that you weren't expecting. So you got to have a contingency strategy in place so that you can stay on budget. As far as properties and looking to hire out, are you all, having the right contractors is key to success.
It is key.
So you kind of learn by trial and error, or,
You do.
You contact a professional like me so that I can have a whole list of people to use.
Yeah.
But do you have any stories to share with the listener today about maybe something you've learned with working with contractors and the proper steps to take?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things, if people can hear, is that it's extremely important to know who you're working with, because that is really going to make or break a project. For us, we have found that nobody is great at everything. It's just, even if they claim to be, it's just the reality of it. And it is great to have a general contractor like in your back pocket that does good work and is a really great maintenance man. But when you are looking at totally redoing a space, and you deal with plumbing and electrical, or roofing, or all of these different aspects of a renovation, we prefer to actually use that specific professional for that specific job. We unfortunately learned that the hard way, and knowing who you're working with is pivotal to the success of the project, because we found ourselves, this was early on, this was in 2019. I was pregnant. There may be some trauma from this experience, but 2 small children at the time. But anyways, we had a very big project, a house that needed to be pretty much completely gutted. And we ended up hearing of this person that was a general contractor, and we met him. He came, looked over, assured us he could get everything done, and we paid him up front. And I know that this is not just our story. I since have heard many other people making this mistake or pitfall when it comes to investing. And we ended up giving him $30,000. And at that time, that was, and really even now, that's a very large amount of money to hand over to someone. And we expected the house to be renovated.
Right.
And what we found is that he ended up taking the money and, started the project, probably got about a week's worth of work done, and then ended up, I think, leaving the state. So it was very hard, and made it very difficult to navigate. But one thing, it didn't stop us. And one thing that we learned from that was, okay, we will never do that again.
Right.
But also, making sure that you know who you're working with.
Yes.
Because we did not know him. And since then, we have made sure that we are getting, recommendations. We're testing them out. We're, having people come, and we're really doing our due diligence.
I think a part of that due diligence, I'm sure you all do, and I know you do because I work with your business, but, it's getting contractors to sign agreements. It's not prepaying for services that haven't been done.
Yeah.
So setting those up, if you're getting started and a contractor is approaching you to say, well, I need the full payment up front, or I even need half of the payment up front, I would caution the listener to say, okay, I will pay a portion of it, but it's going to be in writing. And
Right.
It has a deadline. If this job isn't done by X date, then there's going to be a fee involved maybe for the contractor. I think it's important to set up timelines and timeframes and to have contracts in place so that you aren't taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And of course, always use licensed and insured contractors.
Yes.
Make sure they're pulling permits, that they're doing things the right way, because your reputation in this industry is so important to be known as doing a good job, taking care of your property, and following the rules.
Yeah.
For the safety of everyone that's going to be living in that home. So I think a couple of the pitfalls we've mentioned, and there's a few more, but having a budget. One of the pitfalls is overspending.
Yeah.
It is going in thinking your budget's going to be half of what it ends up being, and you run out of money. I've purchased properties from people who have overspent or over budgeted,
Yeah.
and they didn't have the funds to complete the job, and the house falls into foreclosure. So
Yeah.
you don't want the property to go into foreclosure. You have to have some reserves on hand. When you go to purchase a property, I would say you need a minimum of 6 months of mortgage reserves so that you can go in and really have peace of mind, because this property may not be producing income at that time. Or maybe you're living in the house and you need some reserves so that you can afford to do the repairs or to hire those out. So you need to have financial reserves to avoid financial pitfalls.
Yeah.
And then the contractors, being able to do your research and be prepared. Another thing is the pitfall of purchasing just a terrible home. Being able to do your thorough inspections.
Yes.
And get that done so that it's a safe place. I know for us, we are a little more conservative and have generally looked for a little more cosmetic repair properties.
Yeah.
And they have turned out to be a good investment for us. But also remembering your contracts when you're signing the lease with a tenant, which will be another podcast, but when you're signing the lease, really securing terms that are going to keep you safe and keep your investment secure.
Yeah.
So I think those are some really good pitfalls to avoid. Is there any other pitfalls that you can think that would be helpful to someone getting started that could maybe, hinder their progress in moving forward?
I think that when I think of pitfalls, I also, it's extremely important to have the reserves in place. But when you first get started, I think a pitfall that kind of is in a different category is thinking everything has to be perfect, and then you never get started.
Right.
And so, a pitfall there would be you do have to make the jump sometimes. And so being knowledgeable about things to look for, being knowledgeable about what you can do to make it the best investment that you can. But then also, Luke's favorite phrase is no risk it, no biscuit. And there's a lot of risk involved, but there's a lot of reward.
Yes.
And so, looking at the pitfalls, if you can do it as best as you can, as long as you are actually taking the step forward, then it will hopefully benefit you, because for me and for you, it has been a great a source of passive income for us.
Absolutely. And I know that there's opportunities out there where maybe you are looking to sell. Maybe it is useful to help grow your portfolio to actually sell a property, because there is so much cash flow involved.
Yeah.
I know for us personally, we purchased a foreclosure when we were living overseas. We had not seen the property, and we did a virtual tour, and we bought it for $141,000. A few years later, we did put some money into it, but a few years later, we sold it for $400,000.
Yeah.
And we profited the cash flow, but we said, let's take this cash flow and invest it to grow our rental portfolio, reinvest the funds. And there are things in place like 1031 exchanges and other things to help avoid the tax pitfalls that come with that.
Yeah.
But just being wise when you purchase, so you have a good exit strategy. Maybe if you have a rental property and you say, I want to sell it one day, is it going to profit me money? So just keeping in mind the opportunities with what you can to avoid the big pitfalls.
And I think we very subtly touched on this, but when you are looking at a property and you do see that, okay, wow, this property may need more than what I feel capable of doing. I know for me, in different seasons of my life, that would be very overwhelming to think about doing a whole project or getting it on the market. And I really would encourage you that there are really great project managers. Allyson has been you have been a great project manager. And, for those specific cases that you can look at a house and say, I want that house. I don't know where to start. I don't know the contacts that I need. And finding, someone to help you along, there are people that can do that. and that have all of those tools. I mean, you have a whole list of contractors that you use, and that can avoid a lot of the trouble that may come without that.
Absolutely. And I think too, just to add one more little thing, when you are renovating a house, one of the pitfalls could be overspending with high quality finishes. So I think it's important to remember your audience, who is going to be living in the house, how much are you going to get, and that's going to dictate how to move forward with that rental. So
it's so true. Even for us, something that we do for all of our rentals, and it seems boring, but like we put the same paint, we put the same countertops, we put the same LVP. It's like just very standard, middle of the road, like that we know, okay, this may be boring, but this is a rental. The purpose of this is to generate income.
Yes. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today. I think we really had some great takeaways of things to avoid and things to pursue so that we can help encourage other people to move forward in their investment opportunities. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much. And
thanks
as
for
always,
having me.
tune in next time.